Hi all, I have another very interesting game to show you from the US Chess Championship. Hikaru Nakamura playing against Varuzhan Akobian in round 7. Let's check out this game. So e4 from Nakamura. It seems in this tournament a lot of players are playing e4 for this particular US Championship. e5 from Varuzhan. We see knight f3. And black's statement here is a solid game. The Petrov's defense. So knight takes e5. This is like the main move, d6, and the pawn structure remains symmetrical for the moment. d4, d5, and white now tries to put pressure on black's center, both d5 and e4, to try and increase the pressure. We see bishop e7. White is careful here to castle though before an immediate c4, because it could be that a delayed check might be annoying. So castling here. Now knight c6, and it's here that even though black seems to be threatening knight b4, this is a very theoretical idea to try and undermine the knight on e4. Just play c4 anyway, inviting, it seems, knight b4. This is played. The bishop just retreats, and now black castles. We see knight c3. Again, you can see that white's putting pressure on d5 and e4. This is a very theoretical position. Bishop f5. Now a3, and black takes on c3 now, because if he goes back then d5 can be taken. So he takes on c3, reducing the pressure on d5. B takes, knight c6. Now the bishop here seems to be usefully stopping rook b1. If white wanted to use this b file later, it might be an advantage, and there are some game patterns from practice. There's at least, for example, games of Nigel Short in this line, where this b file has been used for later rook b5, putting pressure on d5 like this, and maybe even coming over to the king side. So it is sometimes useful to be able to put a rook on the b file, but how is that going to be achieved here? First though, we have rook e1, rook e8, and here is a rare and very interesting idea now. This next move, can you guess what Hikaru Nakamura plays here? An intriguing idea based on the b file. So if I give you 5 seconds, it's an unusual looking move. So 5 seconds starting from now, what would you play to try and do something on that b file? Okay, very interesting. Rook a2, sidestepping this bishop. Play rook b2 potentially. But this pawn is actually protected in advance, and also putting pressure on c4. And it would seem awkward. This rook's kind of a loose piece, and one should be wary of loose pieces in general. And in fact, isn't this a major concern? Because if a move like c5, the knight can entrench itself on c4. And you can imagine taking here, this bishop would then have d3 as an example sometimes. But there's a very interesting follow-up idea by white in this position. C takes d5. Queen takes d5, inviting the rook to be put under scrutiny. But here, a key move, a key idea of the whole thing. Rook b2, with now the threat of rook b5 hitting the queen, hitting the knight, and also the queen's responsible for that bishop behind it. So a nice attack on the 5th rank, this rook b5. It's prevented, and we're left with this hanging pawn on a3 in this position. Things get really, really interesting now. This next move, really exciting dynamic play by Nakamura. Can you guess what white plays? He has limited options anyway. If he wants to like save this pawn, what is he going to do? Move it forward? It seems black sitting on the light squares quite comfortably. White wants to energize his pieces. This next move, very, very interesting. 5 seconds. Knight e5, yes, throw it away, get f3 for the bishop. The knight's really aggressive on e5. We have bishop takes a3. Tartko once said a knight on e5 can make attacks quite easy, like play themselves. There's a quotation. And it seems Varuzhan Akobian has been a victim, at least in an earlier round, if you remember, against Wesley So, with a knight on e5 as a prelude to being attacked. Is this going to be another attacking game? We see bishop f3, kicking the queen. And now rook be2 is played. And yes, it seems as though f7 is eyed in some variations, as well as knight c4 being possible in some lines. If white's given another go, another move, knight c4 would be good, attacking the queen and attacking the rook on e8, potentially, as well as hitting these pieces. So black gets rid of that bishop on a3. Knight c4 is harmless in this position, relatively harmless. The queen could go back, for example, and there's other moves. So we have the simple recapture for the moment. Queen takes c1. Nevertheless, in this position, knight c4 now is looking as though that should be addressed. This move needs to be addressed. In particular, a move like knight c4. We see bishop e6. And where is the compensation for the pawn? Is there compensation for the missing queenside pawn? Well, black hasn't got a defensive knight on f6, and that means that h7 here is actually not protected by a piece except for the king, as well as g7, but h7 is easy to probe here with bishop e4. So already with bishop e4, there's a concern now about a battery with queen c2 or queen b1. We see rook ad8, trying to put pressure on white's centre. It seems entirely logical that this knight has neglected some support for the d4 pawn in the centre. Is white's centre in meltdown, or is white going to be able to drum up some concrete ideas and threats against the black king here? We see the move queen b1, probing, again h7. It is only the king protecting h7, and a weakness is now created in the form of g6 on the dark squares. And this next move seems in some ways reckless, because you'd think that an attacking player should go with a strong centre first as a prelude to trying to get an attack, because sometimes the centre will just collapse. So this looks like a very double-edged position. White is a pawn down, and basically if it gets to an endgame it will be unpleasant. But we see the aggressive move f4. So black has an imminent c5 here, and actually he plays that now to try and melt down the white centre. f5, and this is dangerous for black. Very, very dangerous. It's in this position that maybe suboptimal defense was played. C takes d4, sacking a piece there. But it is a tricky position. With the rooks doubled, there are some concrete ideas on e8, if nothing else, potentially. We see c takes d4 though, sacking a piece to try and extinguish white's attack. But after rook takes e7, there's an incredibly powerful move played here by white. A really amazing move now, which shows that, you know, maybe sometimes you can let your center collapse, apparently, and try and get concrete chances against the opponent's king. So if you put yourself in the mindset of a Tau, what would you play here in this position? White play. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video now. Fantastic move here. Okay, knight takes f7, hitting the queen, getting the king to be on a skewer line with the rook, for that rook to be potentially in danger on a skewer line. But how exactly in this position? Can you see the move here? 5 seconds. Starting from now. White to play. So white's basically given back the piece immediately. And now plays bishop d5. This is winning the exchange here. After queen takes d5, but rook takes e6. So we're back with white being the exchange up, but has shed some pawns here after d takes c3. How many pawns is this? It seems 3 pawns on the queen side, but what about black's king? There are concrete ideas now against the king. But if this rook moves, then queen d1 check, and that's the end of it for white. So white uses first this rook to kick the queen and skewer it against the knight here. So there's a problem here with this knight. It's forcing this check, basically, not to lose a piece. King h1, and now supporting the knight. And also making sure that there's no queen takes b7 by supporting the knight like that. Both threats are extinguished, instead of just retreating the knight. But white now plays queen a2 check. And here it's an unfortunate defensive position. If knight c4, there's possibilities like rook e4. However, it might not be entirely simple because white does have some back row issues here with rook d1 check. So this position, one has to be careful about knight c4. Is it easy to refute that? There's other ideas for white, including the check on e7 or just taking on a7. So a move like rook e4 might actually be asking for queen takes e4. But anyway, knight c4 was not played in this position. That wasn't tested. Instead, the king moves. But now rook e7 check, the king is being kicked around. King h6. Is this passed pawn dangerous enough to compensate here for white's attacking possibilities? Queen f7. Very dangerous. We see knight c4 here. Queen takes h7 check. King g5. Rook 7 to e6, cutting the king across here, not letting it escape to f6. And white is threatening things like, well, immediately threatening queen takes g6. Not h4, because then queen takes h4 is check. But g6 is the big problem here. We see queen d3 defending g6. But now h4 check is available now. There's no queen takes h4, and it's played here, driving the king to f4. This is over after queen h6 check. It's going to be mate. It's mating. Here, Varuzhan Akobian resigned. So another emphatic attacking game, unfortunately, with Varuzhan Akobian on the receiving end of dynamic, aggressive play. This game represents a very, very interesting aggressive idea and concept against the Petrov's defense, to sacrifice the a pawn, to try and rapidly double rooks, to try and break down the pawn chain around the opponent's king, even at the expense of seemingly the center collapsing. So a very dramatic example, because quite often, if you want to attack in comfort, you want to try and make sure your center is secure. But here, the center did suffer a meltdown, but it gave white the extra key moves needed to break through black's king and destroy king safety. So I hope you got something from this game. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.